Thank you for accessing this webinar, Launching Units of Study. Today we will discuss Writer's Workshop, Writing Units of Study, and Planning for Instruction. As shown in this literacy tree, we use a literacy framework that embodies oral language development, phonics, spelling and word study, reading, and writing. Since reading and writing are reciprocal processes, the instructional writing strategies mirror those of reading. The reciprocal process of decoding is encoding. When we teach students about characters in reading, for example, the direct and more rigorous application of that content is for them to then develop a character in their writing. When we think of literacy development, I like to think of it as a literacy wheel. If one section of the wheel is not fully inflated, then the wheel will not roll smoothly and easily. In the case of literacy, if the sections are not fully inflated, children will have a hard time acquiring literacy. In our district, we follow the Writing Workshop framework, and we will be using units of study for teaching specific writing lessons throughout the school year in kinder through 5th grades, as stated in our district improvement plan. NEISD adopted the units of study to ensure the alignment of writing instruction across the grade levels to begin showing continuous improvement and meet the performance objectives of the district improvement plan as discussed previously. It was the decision of the district's curriculum and instruction department to have grades kinder through 2nd implement writing units of study in the 2019-2020 school year. 3rd through 5th grades will be expected to implement the units this 2020-2021 school year. The units of study follow a Writer's Workshop framework. Writer's Workshop is meant to give students a voice to tell their stories, their ideas, and share their passions. When Writer's Workshop is going well, we can uncover amazing quirks, laugh out loud adventures, and tear-jerking experiences. What is Writer's Workshop? Notice we use the term writers instead of writing. As teachers of writing, we want to focus on teaching and developing the writer versus the writing at the given time of instruction. Moving towards that understanding allows a teacher more grace to concentrate on the actual student writer's abilities to learn skills, strategies, and craft techniques that will transfer into all genres of writing and writing for life. We should seek to coach the writer using the piece of writing merely as a formative assessment tool as to where they are and what they need at this point in time. As shown, we have recently increased the amount of minutes allotted for writing instruction, with most grade levels having around 45 minutes per day. This should allow enough time for instruction in both conventions and units of study. As you see in the breakdown, conventions should be allocated at around 5 to 10 minutes per day, leaving units of study another 35 to 40 minutes each day. In looking further at the breakdown, a mini lesson is to be short and concise, lasting only 5 to 10 minutes. In order for students to make consistent progress in writing, they must be presented with the opportunity to write for extended periods of time each day. Thus, the independent writing time should be a longer period of time with about 20 to 25 minutes suggested. Finally, the share time is a quick opportunity for students to share their writing. Let's look in more detail at the components including in a writer's workshop. A mini lesson is explicit instruction in a specific writing technique taught in a short 5 to 10 minute period at the start of the workshop. Each mini lesson in the units of study includes 4 components: the connection, the teaching, active engagement, and the link. The connection is the awareness the teacher brings to the students to allow them to access their prior knowledge to support their learning for the mini lesson. Students need to make connections to previous learning and real-life situations. This may be relating the new skill, procedure, or technique to that which was taught on the previous day, or the new item to be taught can be related to a real-life situation. This connection should be fairly short, just a few minutes, with teacher language that sounds like, yesterday we, or today I'm going to remind you. This is an example of a mini lesson from Units of Study. The lessons will specifically state what to say and do when teaching. Keep in mind, you should make appropriate modifications of scenario language to fit students' needs and experiences. For example, this lesson reads, "Once children were all sitting in the meeting area, pulled close around me, I began." You will not read this verbatim. There is excess language included to help build the scenario for better teacher understanding. Instead, you will need to read over each lesson before instructing, synthesizing it down to the key points that you wish to relay to the students. You may choose to highlight these points or write them down on a sticky note for later reference. In addition to synthesizing it, you also want to make the scenarios seem closer to home. If they reference getting on the subway, for example, you may want to change that to getting on the bus, since we do not have a subway system in San Antonio. These small changes will allow students to better connect to the content being presented. The teaching point is also included in this connection section and tells the students exactly what skill, strategy, or craft technique students will be learning during the lesson. This point should be read verbatim. This will also guide you in developing your learning target for the day. Let's take a brief moment to have you complete the first task for this webinar. Choose one upcoming lesson for your grade level. Read through the connection portion of the mini lesson and synthesize it down to the most important points you would want to relay to your students. Then, using the link or the QR code, access the Google form and record your notes on there. Go ahead and press pause to give yourself time to respond. The connection and teaching point is then followed by the actual time the teacher spends modeling a skill, strategy, technique, or procedure to be followed during the writer's workshop. This is considered to be the heart of the lesson, in which mentor texts, mentor sentences, mentor songs or poems, and anchor charts can be used to deliver instruction. The teacher's own writing or student writing samples can also be used to teach and model during this time. This is an example of what the teaching section looks like. Again, you'll need to read through it and synthesize it down to the key points you wish to relay. You'll also notice an anchor chart example. These are provided in the resources that accompany Units of Study and can be printed or recreated depending on the size you prefer. Let's take a brief moment to have you complete the second task for this webinar. Continue in the same lesson and read through the teaching portion of the mini lesson. Synthesize it down to the most important points you want to relay to your students. Using the same Google form, record your notes. Go ahead and press pause to give yourself time to respond. The active engagement is the point in the mini lesson when the teacher will want to have students practice what has been delivered. This practice can be completed via the student's own writing or through a partner share. The teacher's job continues throughout the practice, as he or she must formatively assess by observing and listening to students for an understanding of what was taught. Students' attention should be brought back to the teacher, and the teacher should relate to the students what was observed. Teachers should also take the opportunity to clarify any misunderstandings or simply enhance what was taught. Again, this is an example of the active engagement that accompanies the example mini lesson. You'll notice on the right-hand side, there are teaching tips to help guide you through each lesson. Let's take a brief moment to have you complete the third task for this webinar. Read through the active engagement portion of your mini lesson and synthesize it down to the most important points. Using the Google form, record your notes. Go ahead and press pause to give yourself time to respond. The link is the moment the teacher culminates the teaching and brings closure to the lesson. This portion of the mini lesson is brief, reminding writers to attempt to use a new skill or strategy in their writing today, as well as in future endeavors. In continuing with our mini lesson example, this is the link or closure of the lesson. You'll notice the student writing samples at the bottom. These can be used as mentor text to share with students or to build your own awareness of the work you might expect from your students. Let's take a brief moment to have you complete the fourth task for this webinar. Read through the link portion of your mini lesson and synthesize it down to the most important points you want to relay. Use the link to the Google form to record your notes. Go ahead and press pause to give yourself time to respond. We will now take a few minutes to watch an example mini lesson in the classroom. As you watch this mini lesson, listen to see if you can identify the four components: the connection, the teaching, the active engagement, and the link.
Guys, I'm excited. I'm really pumped. You know why? Because I read your books last night, your writer's notebooks. And what I saw in there made me so happy. I'm going to tell you exactly what I saw. I saw you writing longer and stronger. I saw you writing meaningful stories and true stories. You get a big thumbs up on that. But as I was reading some of them, I saw that when I got to the interesting part, I wish you would have wrote more so that I can see what you saw and feel what you felt. So I went home and I looked in my writer's notebook. Guess what? I did the same thing you did. I wrote in a way where the reader couldn't really feel what I felt and couldn't really see what I saw. So today, I'm going to teach you how to take out a real interesting part of your story, and you might have more than one in there, and stretch it out and make it interesting in a way that they could see what you saw and feel what you felt. Let me show you what I mean. I wrote a story in my writer's notebook about the time I was riding my bike down Snake Hill in Central Park. Snake Hill is very curvy. That's why they call it Snake Hill. And so I was riding my bike and I was going faster and faster down the hill. And all of a sudden, the front wheel hit a rock and I fell. But then I realized, hey, that's the interesting part. When I fell, that's the main part of that story. So I said, let me think a minute. So I played the movie in my mind as to what happened. And I saw what really happened come alive inside my head. And I wrote it down. And it goes like this. I was riding faster and faster down the hill. The wheel hit a rock. My feet flew off the pedals. And sometimes, when you do this, you can act it out. That's what I'm going to do. My feet flew off the pedals. My hands went out in front of me. My head went over the handlebars. This is going to really hurt, I thought. Crunch. I landed on my back. Did you notice how I stretched out that part where I fell to show, when I played the movie in my mind, that my feet came off the pedals, my hand came off the handlebars and went out in front of me, my head went over the handlebars, and I added some thinking. This is going to really hurt, I thought. Crunch. Crunch doesn't sound too good, does it? I landed on my back. Thumbs up if you could do that. Now it's your turn. Open up your notebooks. You're going to find an interesting part of your story. And when you find it, give me a thumbs up. As soon as you find it, give me a thumbs up. So one thumbs up over there. Thumbs up over there. Big thumbs up over there. Okay, good. Look at all these thumbs up. Now I want you to take your pencil and I want you to put a box around that interesting part. Draw a box around the interesting part. If it's the whole thing, then do that. Draw a box. Okay. Let me see some interesting parts we have here. Now, class, writers, I want you to take a minute. Play a movie in your mind. Exactly what happened in a way where the reader can see what you saw and feel what you felt. You can close your eyes if you want to. When you get that movie, give me a thumbs up. All right? Good. Partner A, turn to partner B and tell your partner that movie so that they can feel what you felt and see what you saw. Writers, I heard some great, great stories. I can see it and I felt it. So writers, today and every day, one thing you could do to make your story more interesting is to take that interesting part and stretch it out so that the reader can feel it and the reader can see it. Thumbs up if you could do that. Good. Now, I want you to remember, when you go back to your seats, I want you to use all the strategies we learned in making our writing better. Not just this one. Okay? Good. Watch me now.
You probably noticed that this lesson was very short and concise. Keeping mini lessons 5 to 10 minutes can sometimes be difficult. Here are some tips that might assist. When instructing students, you may want to set a timer for 10 minutes and pace yourself to finish within that time frame. You may also want to minimize disruptions from your students. Teach them to wait until you are finished with the mini lesson before asking questions, and do your best not to call on them if they do raise their hand or interrupt. One strategy for accomplishing this is to teach students to put their questions in their pocket and save it for later. Then, after you send students off to write independently, you can check in with students to address their questions without taking time away from the whole class. Also, make sure you prepare for the lesson in advance. This is crucial. You absolutely must read the lesson prior to teaching it. I generally read a lesson multiple times to ensure that I understand the context and can then synthesize it down to the key pieces in order to be concise when instructing students. Having anchor charts, mentor texts, and any other materials prepared also helps ease through the lesson. Lastly, use the time with students to formatively assess their grasp on the content. As students are writing or interacting during the active engagement portion of the mini lesson, you should be monitoring and notating who understands the content and who may need additional instruction. This will help drive your conferences and small groups during independent writing. The next component of the Writer's Workshop is independent writing, in which students are doing just that, writing on their own about nearly anything of interest to them. We do not give them prompts, but let them decide based on their own life experiences and passions. During this part of Writer's Workshop, students will be at all different places in the writing cycle, working at their own pace and towards their own personal goal. As a result, differentiation occurs at this time through one-on-one conferences and small group work. One of the important goals of Writing Workshop is to slow down the process of writing so that feedback is possible during the process and not just at the end. Immediate feedback has been identified as having a significant effect on student achievement. One effective way to provide feedback is through conferring. Conferring is a means of both assessing to quickly gather information about students to determine where they fall on the continuum of learning, and providing targeted individualized instruction to help students move to the next level of performance. Conferences are a powerful way to support each student's growth and independence because teachers are able to meet with students right where they are and provide differentiated instruction that will potentially have the biggest impact for that student. When a teacher confers with a student, he or she has a conversation with the student about what they are doing as a writer. As teachers, we want to make sure we are present as a reader to truly try and understand the message the writer is trying to convey to their audience. This goes right along with the term writer's workshop versus writing workshop, because we want to focus on what the student is doing as a writer and not what they are currently doing in their piece of writing. We may begin the conversation by asking, "How's it going today?" Or, "What are you working on as a writer today?" We want to groom the students to begin having a conversation with us about what they are doing as a writer, such as using descriptive words to show more detail or adding more facts to persuade a reader. During this time, you will need to try to home in on one teaching point that the student may be ready to learn that's within their zone of proximal development. If, for example, a student attempted adding a lead to their writing, but it's a bit off topic, we may want to make that the focus of the conference, as they have shown effort in that area, but we may need to enhance their understanding a little bit. To help guide you on what to focus on during a conference, the Units of Study kit includes a book called the If Then book. Within this book, there are multiple scenarios for each type of writing that are written to guide you as to how to approach a student in a conference. If they're showing this writing behavior, then you could focus on the following. These scenarios may help reduce some of the uncertainty when meeting with students in one-on-one conferences or in small groups. When the teacher conducts conferences with students, he or she may notice a group of students that all need support with the same certain skill or technique. The teacher should then pull these students as a small group to guide them in understanding what it is that can make their approach as a writer better. For example, a teacher may notice students are not adding descriptive words to their writing to make the writing more detailed and fun for the reader. The teacher can review a mentor text previously used to point out the description, have students try it in their writing, and then send them off to continue independently. At that point, the teacher can decide to pull another group if he or she sees the need, or continue with one-on-one conferring. The lessons in the Units of Study also provide guidance with conferring and small group work. This is the portion of Writer's Workshop in which you are differentiating instruction to meet the needs of your specific students. As a result, the content that's included in this section offers ideas on how to handle conferences during each mini lesson, but you do not have to follow them explicitly if your students are displaying need for different skills or strategies. You'll also notice on this page the mid-workshop teach. This is the time when you pause independent writing time to remind students of an instructional strategy or technique. It's meant to be very short and concise, allowing students to then jump right back into their writing. At the end of Writer's Workshop, we have share time. This is the time that student writers share their efforts and successes in writing. Sharing does not mean that the student must read his or her entire piece. The student might be selected to read a single sentence containing a skill that was previously taught and created in the way the teacher envisioned. A student could be selected to share descriptive words used to describe a setting. And yet another student can be selected to read an entire beginning or ending. It all depends on what it is the teacher would like to focus on. Similarly, sharing does not have to occur as a whole group. Partners or trios can share, or an entire table can share one at a time. As with each of the examples before, the lessons also include and script out the share component. This is sometimes just a way to share out student efforts for the day, culminating Writer's Workshop. Other times, this section includes the brief teaching of a concept students will need for the next day's mini lesson. It's crucial that we read through this section to make sure we do not miss any potential teach pieces in order to avoid confusion in future instruction. Planning for writing. When planning for a unit, you'll want to read the introduction to get a gist of the writing journey that students are going to take. You may also want to take a picture walk through the unit to look at anchor charts and student samples along the way. This will give you an idea of what the unit encompasses. Similarly, looking at the student writing samples at the end of the unit will help you gauge your end goal for students. In terms of daily instruction, you'll need to read through each lesson before instructing students. The lessons are not written as a script, but more as a written scenario that you will need to synthesize down to include only the most important points. I generally read through a lesson once for understanding, then again to decide what is most important and how I want to relay that message when teaching. The important points can be highlighted in the text or written down on a Post-it for reference. We do recommend that in addition to reading and synthesizing the lesson, you also prepare any materials that may be needed in advance, allowing the lesson to run smoothly and effortlessly. Within NEISD, we have IPGs for each content area. The writing information can be found within the ELAR IPG for your grade level. Once you open the ELAR IPG, you'll scroll down until you see the writing workshop section. The link provided will take you to your specific grade level's pacing guide, as you see on the bottom of the screen. Throughout the entire year, this link, no matter what week or reading unit, will always take teachers to the same pacing guide with links to all of the unit write-ups for the year. This is because there is no set prescribed day or days for the session in the writing units of study. It is, however, not recommended to spend more than 2 days on a session. Each unit should not take more than 5 to 6 weeks. We are not teaching for mastery, we are teaching for growth. Once we finish a lesson or a unit, we move on to the next. Once you click on one specific unit, this is an example of the document you will view. As you can see, it includes the title and suggested time frame at the top, followed by a unit summary, standards included in the unit, and understandings and essential questions that are encompassed within the unit. Continuing down the document, you'll see a number of sections, including the assessment options found within the on-demand performance tasks section. We recommend that each class obtain a pre- and post-assessment for each unit, helping to measure student growth throughout the unit and throughout the school year. You will also notice links within the sample evidence category. These provide checklists, rubrics, and learning progressions to help gauge where students are currently in their writing ability, as well as where they may need to go next in terms of writing instruction. This example also includes a mentor text section and resource section with links to valuable resources that you may find useful. In the next portion, you'll discover the session write-ups, which include the session titles, a summary of the teaching points for each session, as well as the resources provided by Heinemann for each session. Zooming in on the resources available for a session, you'll notice they include mentor texts, student writing samples, and sometimes paper choices. Anything available in Spanish is also linked on these documents. If you have any questions about mentor text or other materials available in Spanish, please reach out to your bilingual specialist. Within the ELAR IPG, you'll also find a link to the conventions document. When you click on this link, it will take you to a year-long document outlining each of the conventions for your grade level organized by unit of study. You will also see a sample learning target, as well as resources that you may use to instruct each of these standards. As a side note, the link to the lesson structure for Patterns of Power is not a lesson itself, but shows a sample lesson progression through the 5 to 6 day cycle implemented with Patterns of Power. Let's take a brief moment to have you complete the last task for this webinar. To complete task 5, take a moment to navigate to the IPG for your first unit in writing. Look over the unit documents, and then on the Google form, list the materials you will need to prepare in order to begin teaching the unit and/or the beginning lessons. Go ahead and press pause to give yourselves time to respond. Here are some tips to wrap things up. Anchor charts are essential. When created together as a class, they provide an anchor for student learning and for later reference. As discussed previously, try your best not to allow any interruptions during the mini lesson to keep things short. Celebrate absolutely every effort a student makes, no matter how small. Writing is a difficult task, and students need to know that they have a supportive audience. These units are meant to be cyclical and continue to build on themselves within the grade level as well as vertically throughout grade levels. Remember that we are not teaching to mastery, but exposing students to a variety of skills, strategies, and craft techniques. They will walk away with those that they are ready for. When beginning to conference with students, it's suggested that you choose just 4 scenarios from the If-Then book to relay to students that correlate with your current unit. This will allow you to become really good at those 4 scenarios, and then when you're ready, you can add more conferences to your tool belt. And lastly, one of the best ways to prepare to teach a unit is to actually write a composition yourself following the teaching points within that unit. This will help you to better understand what is encompassed in the unit, as well as to prepare you for potential misunderstandings that the students may experience. Most of all, remember, it's not about perfect. It's about effort. And when you implement that effort into your life every single day, that's where transformation happens. That's how change occurs. Keep going and remember why you started. It's all about the kids. This concludes the webinar. We hope you have learned more about units of study in preparation for the upcoming year. As always, please reach out if you have any questions or need any additional support. Thank you.